now, without a website, people are going to question, like, is this law firm legit? I mean, the
Right.
first thing people are going to do when they hear, oh, Lauren started her own law firm is Google it, and something's got to be there. Welcome to A Different Practice. I'm your host, Lauren Lester, and I'm obsessed with all things business, well-being, and optimizing the practice of law for solo and small firm lawyers. I started my solo practice right out of law school, built it from the ground up, and now work 4 days a week while earning well over 6 figures. I'm here to share tangible, concrete tips and resources for ditching the legal profession's antiquated approach and building a law practice that optimizes growth and enjoyment. Think of this as grabbing coffee with your work bestie, mixed with all the stuff they didn't teach you in law school about how to run a business. Pull up a seat, grab a cup, and get ready to be encouraged and challenged. This is A Different Practice. Y'all, we've got our first crossover episode, and it was so good, we've made it a two-parter. I'm so excited to share this one today. A few months ago, Mathew Kerbis and I did a LinkedIn Live where we answered questions just kind of about opening your own law firm and taking that leap and what it was really like and kind of the honest information that people wanted to know. And in particular, we did this because if you haven't seen in the news or maybe haven't been affected by it, there's been a string of downsizing, it seems, at big law. So there's a lot of folks who have a ton of experience, maybe have only ever worked in big law, who are now finding themselves without employment, and they're thinking about maybe branching out on their own. So we put together this LinkedIn Live to answer those questions, and I'm really excited to share the audio with you today. This audio was also featured as an episode on Mathew's podcast, Law Subscribed, and I want to tell you a little bit about him before we jump in. Mathew Kerbis is the subscription attorney. He is on a mission to get more attorneys to adopt the subscription model and abandon the billable hour, something we can definitely get behind here at A Different Practice. He founded the law firm Subscription Attorney in 2022 after working for private practice law firms for 9 years. The Subscription Attorney is a modern law firm offering subscriptions starting at just $19.99 a month. Mathew realized that this subscription model could really revolutionize the legal profession, so he launched his podcast, Law Subscribed, to help the rest of the legal profession make the same choice. He was a 2023 ABA Tech Show speaker on the subscription model for legal services and law in the metaverse. He's also presented on the subscription model to Stanford's Code X online community. This should all come as no surprise because Mathew has been an ABA leader for over a decade. He's chaired boards, advocated for legal education reform, interviewed ABA presidents, state appellate and Supreme Court justices, and even lobbied Congress. He also volunteers on the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal Systems Foundation Advisory Committee. He's on the Deerfield Park Foundation Board, the Deerfield Family Theater Board. He was also a speaker at 2021's Metaverse Safety Week. And as a law student, he served as an extern for the Honorable Justice Robert E. Gordon of the Illinois Appellate Court in the 1st District. Whew, he has done so much. If you want to learn more about Mathew or even just connect with him, you can check out his website, which is mathewkerbis.com, mathewkerbis.com, or connect with him on LinkedIn. I'm really excited for y'all to hear this conversation. We had so much fun having it. Mathew is a wealth of information, and it's just really nice to chat and share that information with others who are really just looking to build a practice that works for them and that they love. So let's dive in.
Spoiler alert, the answer to should I start a law firm is yes. We're going to talk about how. We're just getting started here, so I'm going to make sure I post this again to my channel so everyone can see it. With that, Lauren, if you just want to give a little bit of a background of yourself, what kind of law firm do you have, when you started your own firm, and on your practice area.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Lester. I'm a solo attorney in Denver, and I've had my practice a little over 7 years now. I started it right out of law school, made that crazy plunge, and I practice for all of life's milestones. So I provide affordable legal services for divorce, marriage, death, and estate planning. And so I'm really excited to be here to just talk about my journey, the wins and losses, and certainly give you some information to avoid the losses so that if you are going out on your own, you can kind of accelerate your practice without having to trip over some of those stumbling blocks.
Yeah. This is great. I'm so excited to get into it. And then just a quick background on myself is I joined the Great Resignation in March of 2022 and I decided to start my own law firm. I enjoyed where I worked before, but it's hard to build a practice within a practice. And I sort of decided that I wanted to pivot from litigation to transactional. I wanted to practice law differently and bill on subscriptions instead of billing by the hour and trying to serve the latent legal market with affordable pricing. And I think you and I, Lauren, share that in common, that we're taking a different approach to accessibility with the way that we started our own law firms. And so I have a podcast, Law Subscribe, where I've talked to you twice. One of your episodes is live with your business partner, Spedinars. And in the future, your second episode about your law firm will be coming out in the near future. But then that first interview that I interviewed you about is about on top of just your law firm, you also have another business which actually helps lawyers practice law differently. So if that's not it's not really bearing the lead of the name of the business, but go ahead, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so my business is a different practice, which, as Matthew said, I co-founded with my business partner, Jessica Bednars. And it really was born out of trying to help other attorneys who came to us and said, man, I really like the way that you're practicing. How do I do this? I can't find any resources out there. They certainly didn't teach me any of this stuff in law school. And so we built a different practice to do exactly that. And our mission is to help solo and small firms optimize their practices for both growth and enjoyment.
Yeah, and so the reason why we decided it was important to have this conversation is because a lot of attorneys are being let go right now. A lot of that is happening more in big law. And so, but in addition to just practicing law as business owners, where we have to focus a lot on the business and not just the practice of law, Lauren and I are thinking a lot about this also because I have the podcast. Lauren has a different practice. So we're also thinking all the time about what lawyers can do to have a successful law firm. And so with that, I think let's just start out, Lauren, with, this was your second career. And so you sort of knew you wanted to, such circumstances being what they were, you essentially went solo very soon after graduating, right? And so, maybe talk a little bit about that, about some trepidation that you had and something that maybe share some lessons of some things that you wish you would have known then that you know now.
Yeah, so law is a second career for me. And I think anyone starting out opening their practice really needs two focuses. One is on the practical, substantive side of actually practicing law, and the other piece is on the business side. And so for me, coming out of law school, I certainly didn't have the substantive piece, but law being a second career, I had the business side. So I had worked as a project manager in the web development space for about a decade prior to starting my own firm. So I felt pretty good about the business piece. I certainly didn't know everything. I wasn't an expert by any means, but I had enough of a footing that I had some confidence there that I could open up my own practice. And on the substantive side, I really surrounded myself with folks who would provide that support. Here in Colorado, as I have heard in many jurisdictions, the legal community is a lot smaller than you might think. And so I really cold emailed colleagues and said, hey, I'm starting my firm. Can I take you out to coffee and just pick your brain? And really found that there were a handful that I surrounded myself with and could ask them those substantive questions. And in return, for a lot of them, offer them some of the business information and business advice that I had. So really starting out and building that network around you, because owning your own law firm, although amazing, has some challenges. And one of them is you're really siloed. Like it's just you all day, every day, right? No one walks by your office and pops their head in to say, hey, how's it going? Or I've got this quick question, and you can't do the same. So you really have to actively try and seek out those relationships when you're starting to build that network around yourself. I thought I just saw a question, but
I did. Flora, okay. If we just got to a natural stopping point, I encourage you to raise your hand again. I can't invite you up here unless that hand is raised. Okay, there we go. Let's bring Flora up to ask a question. Hey, Flora, whenever you're ready, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask away. At this point, Flora, who raised her hand, we weren't able to record her audio, but she asked a question about launching a virtual law practice and living in one state, but practicing in a different state because that's where she was licensed. And so you're going to be hearing us answer the question of what it's like to have a virtual law firm in response to Flora's question.
My practice is virtual. It helps me keep overhead low. And I really found, so pre-pandemic, I did it because I was just starting out and the cost I honestly just couldn't justify. So I was really hesitant to tell folks like, oh, I'll meet you at a local coffee shop or some other public location you're comfortable with. And I found that the response to that was phenomenal. People were like, oh my gosh, thank you. I don't have to drive across town, or, I'm busy. Or I met someone once, they were getting their oil changed, and I met them at the car dealership, which no one was there. It was like the most private conversation I think I've ever had. But she loved it because she was like, I'm just going to sit here for an hour anyway. I'm busy. I've got work, kids, life, right, to do. And so I've actually found it's a benefit because it lets me go out to meet people as long as they're comfortable with it. So I like not having the overhead. And certainly after the pandemic, I think people are even more comfortable either with virtual meetings or, meeting somewhere that works best for them.
Yeah, and Flora, it's always great to meet someone who listens to the podcast. As Lauren knows, because she has a podcast too, I'll plug her podcast. A Different Practice, right, is the podcast,
yep.
Lauren?
Yep.
It's a very much a solitary thing, even when you have a guest. You sort of put the podcast out there and you see the downloads, but it's hard to interact with listeners. So Flora, it's great that you're here. I'm glad you're a listener. So, but that's a great question. Virtual law practice, right? Let's go off that, Lauren. So I have a virtual law firm. I'm in Deerfield, Illinois, but I serve clients everywhere in the state of Illinois. I've even served clients outside of the state, but transacting in Illinois. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a Florida client who has some Illinois franchises. I had a UK client purchasing commercial real estate in Illinois in a town like basically next door to me, like 2 towns over. And thanks to technology and Zoom and everything, I could meet them face to face, confirm they're not a troll or a spammer, right? And now I could take on a client who's across the ocean, where I wouldn't have been able to do that before. I would have had a lot of trepidation about something like that. But I make my clients meet me at least on Zoom face to face in prospective client meetings. So in a way, being a virtual law firm is actually a great way to potentially fight fraud, because I'm requiring that clients meet with me on Zoom, camera on, to make sure I could look them in the eye that they're a real person, not a spammer, and if they're willing to do that. I've had prospective clients who have reached out through the website where they see that I require that to meet with them, or for them to sign up with me as a client, and then they either close the Zoom meeting or they cancel it. So it's actually good fraud prevention is if you set up your virtual law firm in that kind of a way.
Right. And I love that you said, too, it also allows you to serve a much bigger geographic area within the state of Illinois, which I feel, too. I mean, I don't know a lot about Illinois, but I would imagine that there are some pockets that are maybe a bit more rural, like we have here in Colorado. I mean, there are literally counties that we have that have 0 lawyers, just no family lawyers, just no lawyers at all. And so in terms of kind of that access to justice piece too, right, being able to serve those folks, I mean, they wouldn't be able to travel to Denver to come to meet with me in my office, but they can certainly pick up the phone, or we can have a Zoom meeting, assuming that they have access to internet, which most folks do, or can certainly get to a place that has it. And so it allows me to have a much bigger reach within the state than I think traditional law firms were we're in Denver, we serve Denver, but we don't serve, Colorado Springs, 100 miles south of us. So it really does expand your market capabilities too.
Right. And that's not to say that having somewhere to go in person can also be valuable. Like I said, I'm in Deerfield, Illinois. We're getting what's called a brick and mortar, which is like a WeWork competitor, but it started in Park Ridge, Illinois. So it's like a local grown competitor to WeWork, where they're trying to serve the suburbs. And they're opening up May 1st in downtown Deerfield, which is only a 3-minute drive for me, or 8-minute scooter ride. And nice. I'm going to be one of the first people who sign up to subscribe to. I think they do 8 times a month is their lowest subscription, to go in there 8 times a month and they do a daily subscription. They do a virtual mailboxes. So instead of using a UPS to be a virtual mailbox, if you want an actual physical place, clients can go and meet you for a virtual mailbox, because you could still rent space a la carte through this WeWork type setting. Then you could do a virtual mailbox there, and all their pricing is super affordable compared to the high overhead of an actual office space that you're renting. And one of the ways, you and I, that we're able to afford or provide affordable services is we keep our overhead as low as possible. But I'm really looking forward to that space also for networking. Small business owners are going to be renting the same space. That's my sweet spot, right, for clients. So it's almost like a marketing spend and not like a temporary
Yeah.
office spend. So, but I certainly wouldn't have been able to afford to do that in like the first six to 8 months of me operating, right? But now I'm at a place where I could afford that. So like starting out virtually is also a really great way to just like bootstrap your business and get going.
And that's one of the things I was really impressed about in terms of starting my own law firm was it didn't take really that much capital. I mean, people will start about talking about building a business and you need so much capital to get started. But really for me, it was my computer, which I had, and I think most people have. And for me, malpractice insurance, like that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of a non-negotiable. We aren't required to have it here in Colorado, but that just kind of made sense for me. But in your first year, it's like really cheap because there's nothing to cover. But outside of that, I mean, there's a ton of tech and there's office space and there's all the stuff you could add, but it's really nice, or I found it really helpful to know that I didn't need any of that and I could always add it on once I actually had the revenue coming in to support it. So you don't have to feel like, oh, I have to make this $10,000 expenditure when I have zero money coming in.
Right.
You really don't have to make that big of an investment.
Right. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough when starting a law firm is the costs, like the actual cost. Like I'm going to say right now, because I'm coming up on a year, right, of operating my business
That's so exciting.
Just a few weeks. I know. And in terms of like operating expenses, not including advertising, of which I've done a little bit. I mean, it cost me $4,500 to operate, and the biggest spend for me was professional liability insurance.
Right.
And so for the first year, that's my non-advertising marketing expenses, right? I did invest another $1,500 into some ad spend, some marketing. But $6,000, for a little bit of ad spend too, for the first year of operating. And since I'm the subscription attorney, I know that when I hit $500 in monthly recurring revenue, that if I keep those clients happy, or in my case, I happen to get one client that signed up at that amount, right?
Yeah.
Like if I keep that client happy, then my expenses are paid for, right? And I certainly plan to, and I've upgraded some technology. So like I used to use like one document automation software, and now I'm moving over to Gavel, which Lauren, you use, which is formerly
Right.
Documate, right? So like I've made some upgrades with the technology that I'm using, but even that is all because it's all subscription based and I have a subscription practice, I'm able to easily predict my income and my spend. And I'm about to have a year's worth of data to do that. So I'm very excited to have that data to look back on. And how you track that, right? Like I don't know if I'm going to use this forever, but like right now, like I'm tracking I do all electronic payments and I use Stripe to power my payments. I actually just signed up with Gravity Legal because I had my first client where I needed to open up a trust account. And that's a whole conversation we could have of how to do that. At least in Illinois, you go on the Illinois Trust Fund website. They have a dedicated website. They have a form there. You fill out the form. You bring it to your bank. You have to do it in person, at least at my bank. And then it took an hour, and because they don't open these accounts every day. So like they don't know. They have to like go to their back office. They have to pull up their the sheets of like how do you open up an IOLTA account. And then we were able to figure it out. I got set up, and now I need Gravity Legal. I just got set up. I'm in the process of getting set up with Gravity Legal so that I can pay for those fees, the processing fees, through my operating account.
Right.
So right now I use waveapps.com, and all I do is I integrate it with I share it. I think it's through Plaid, or it's through like one of these integrations that have all the compliance, where it tracks all of my spending and all of my income, right? So I could produce all sorts of income statements or all sorts of expense reports and everything that I need to see what I'm earning versus what I'm spending. And I go in at the beginning of every week and I categorize last week's income and spend. And so it's really easy for me to look at that data and see, over the last year, what I made, what I spent, where I spent it. It's all categorized, and that way I could just send that PDF to my CPA, for my taxes, which I haven't actually done yet. Lauren, I'd love to hear from you. How is tax season as a solopreneur? Because I haven't done it yet. So maybe talk a little bit about that. What are taxes like when you own your own law firm?
Well, if you're using Wave, which is what I use, they're super easy because I do the same exact thing. I think the key is keeping up with it consistently and not waiting until March to do your entire last year's organization. So I do mine the same. For me, it's every month at this point, but I go through and categorize. Actually, it's twice a month. I go through and categorize income and expenses and just kind of keep my pulse on everything. But yeah, I just download the report that says cash in, cash out. What I like about Wave 2 is there's the confidentiality piece. So my CPA has no idea where this income comes from. I have a cross-reference, which is the invoice number, so that I could know for auditing purposes, this was this client, this is what I did, but they're not getting that information, but they just see revenue and expenses and they go through and that's all my accountant needs too. And then they give me a form and I sign it. And I do also pay quarterly taxes. So that is something as a solopreneur, whether you're an LLC or filing as an S Corp, you do have to keep on top of. But I just got a percentage from my CPA and I just make sure revenue minus expenses for that quarter, whatever that percentage comes out to, I make that quarterly tax payment. But outside of that, it's pretty easy. It feels daunting, but once you kind of do it a few times, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and we have probably all lawyers, so they all know this disclaimer, but no legal advice, no financial advice. Everything we're talking about is just for educational purposes only. I mean, this is all super important information, right? That's just not discussed. You just don't hear about it. You certainly don't learn about it in law school, right? There's something that I wanted to say that I gave that disclaimer for in particular, and now I can't remember what it was. So
talk to your CPA. Don't listen to us about taxes.
Talk to your CPA. Don't listen to us about financials and all that. But yeah, that's something to it's important considerations. And so, but just like even things like setting up a business bank account, right? So if you've never been, like if you're not, I remember now. So single member LLC versus an S Corp, right? So if you're not a business law attorney, you might not know this, right? But a single member LLC, you're essentially self-employed for tax purposes if you're just passed through taxation. There's, a lot of different reasons to do it. It depends on your situation, but it is certainly the easiest way to start out. And I represent a lot of freelancers, and so that's usually the easiest way for them to start out to incorporate as a single member LLC. The typical reason why I'd counsel a client to switch over to an S Corp is because then you're paying yourself as an employee, and there are certain deductions and certain like all the income coming into the firm isn't taxable in the same way. And so you can reduce tax liability, but it's hard to do that in your first year of operation, especially if you don't know how much money you're going to make. But you can transition from single member to S Corp for tax purposes down the line. There are, your Secretary of State has certain fees associated with that. If you're not a business law attorney, hire a business law attorney to help you, make sure you're doing things compliantly if you're not comfortable with it. But yeah, like literally just like starting a business, right? So like, what do? Do a trademark search. Like if you want to hire a trademark attorney, to do that, then good for you. If you have the ability to do that, if you are a trademark attorney, it's a little bit easier. But do a trademark search. Search your Secretary of State's website for other businesses that have the name that you want, because you don't need to be your name LLC. It doesn't need to be what that is anymore. You could do that if you want. And there's like I've learned a lot from having Subscription Attorney LLC be the name of my law firm, because some clients love it and some institutional clients are like, well, we want a more like law firm sounding law firm name. And so like I'm even debating like opening up a whole new brand and doing a DBA. Of course, I'd have to get an additional coverage, professional liability coverage for that. And, it'd be the same entity, but a DBA. So I'm debating whether or not I want to do that. But like whatever your business, name that you want to have, is it even trademarkable? Is it too generic? I'm trying to think about something that might be ethical. It's like, we'll fight for you, California personal injury attorneys, something like that, like something that's not like the best, right? You can't claim to be the best, but like, we'll fight for you, California. You could, if you all in on a particular niche, make that your brand name for your law firm. Every jurisdiction allows it. Thank you, Law HQ, for suing the licensing bodies for law firms in every state to allow us to all have trade names everywhere. And it also becomes a sellable asset down the line, which is something else that's not talked about a lot, which is if your law firm is not associated with your name, but it's associated with a trade name or a brand, then and you don't have a billable hour model, you have something more predictable, then being able to sell your law firm 10, 20, 30 years from now is a lot easier to do. And so those are considerations when even just starting your law firm is, what trade name do you want to use? And is it available? For a trade, is it trademarkable from a U.S. trademark perspective? And also, is it available for your Secretary of State's LLC registration. If you're, certain states have different rules, you have to be a PLLC. So every jurisdiction is a little bit different. But then also is the domain available? Thattradename.com. And do you want that? You have to do that search. Like, this is all the stuff about when starting a business. You have to make sure all these things are available. Every week I host talks for a freelancer group called Scaling Freelance on meetup.com/scaling freelance. We have an unlisted YouTube playlist of all the past talks, and one of them is about websites. Like, you have to get your domain somewhere. Do you use GoDaddy? Do you use Google Domains? If you're all in on Google Workspace for your business, so instead of Microsoft 365, I use Google Workspace. I wish I wasn't using GoDaddy already for many, many years, because I would have preferred to use Google Domains, because everything's just right there, all in the same ecosystem. I use Google Voice for my VoIP, for like my phone system. I'm all in on Google. I only have Microsoft 365 products because other lawyers use them. That's it.
That's funny.
So like little things like that about like running and operating your business. I have a lot of these talks with the freelancers, but it's all similar, useful stuff from lawyers starting their business too. Like from just like the nitty gritty, Lauren, of like operating a business. Like, what are some of the things, that you had to do to set up to get started? I mean, it's further away for you than it is for me because I'm still in my first year, but still, I'm sure there's things like there's technology that you're using now that maybe you wish existed, back when you got started.
The website is where I started because that was my background. So it made sense to me. But I definitely think grabbing a domain name, that almost to me feels harder than the business name. So my domain name for my law firm is mylifelawyer.com, and my law firm is Lester Law. But that honestly came out of because Lester Law was like, the domain was taken. It wasn't taken in Colorado, but the domain was taken. So I had to kind of come up with something different, which ended up being a great blessing. But yeah, kind of coming up with a domain that has keywords or that people can remember, that's not 50 characters long and uses words that are really hard to spell sometimes. That I actually found to be one of the challenges in starting, is finding something that would work there and then getting the website up. It is from my background, so for me that wasn't too bad, but there are a ton of templated sites that really make it kind of plug and play. You can put a basic website up, but I think now, without a website, people are going to question, like, is this law firm legit? I mean, the first thing people are going to do when they hear, oh, Lauren started her own law firm, is Google it, and something's got to be there for them to find. So really the website, of all the marketing things, I think down the road, getting into more marketing strategies, but that initial one was really helpful that I leaned into. And then for me, it was little things like calendaring and spending a lot of time up front that I wish I changed sooner to have clients do that. I was really anxious in the beginning of like, I'm going to get double booked. Like, they're going to see my calendar. I mean, this isn't going to work. And then when I came across, I use Acuity, which I think now is Squarespace scheduling, but integrating that was like a game changer because I didn't have to go back and forth with the emails and does this time work? And no, that time works. Oh no, that changes. So that really made a huge difference in terms of scheduling, both for potential clients, because I could put it right on the website and take, I don't know, probably 3 hours a week off of my plate of dealing with that. And then even for existing clients that they could schedule at any time. So I wish I did integrate that sooner. It's a pretty inexpensive subscription for what it does. And then I use the Google Suite as well for my email. That was really easy to set up. I use Clio for my case management software. I don't love it, but I'm 7 years in now and thinking about changing is pretty daunting. But that's really kind of where I started. I didn't have a lot of tech in the beginning because, like you said, Matthew, right? Like, the revenue isn't there. And really, I think where a lot of businesses, in particular attorneys, get in trouble is they buy all the stuff without having the data to say, I have the revenue to support this. So if you're on a subscription model and you're like, okay, when I get that 10th subscription, then I can go out and get whatever this software is that I'm looking at. That's really important versus I'm just going to buy all this stuff and hope the money comes in. That's a really risky way to operate the business in the beginning. And owning your own business is risky, but it's really a calculated risk that you want to take with some thought to it. All right, there's more where that came from in our next episode. If you have any questions or want us to dive into something more, please be sure to reach out and tell us what you want. You can either send us an email at hello@adifferentpractice.com, or you can leave us a voice memo. The link to leave a voice memo is at the bottom of the show description, wherever you get your podcast. We will feature your voice memo on an episode and answer your question directly. So send us your questions so that we can answer them. And tune in next week for the next episode where we'll pick up on this conversation, where we'll keep talking about the real nitty-gritty details about running your own law firm, things to consider, pitfalls to avoid, and some of the real wins that you can have. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, keep building. I'm over here giving you a virtual high five because you just finished another episode of A Different Practice. For more from this episode, head over to adifferentpractice.com/podcast for show notes and links to resources. If you found this episode helpful, let me know by leaving a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you're looking for even more practical tools to optimize your law practice for growth and enjoyment, be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter. The link is waiting for you at adifferentpractice.com/subscribe. I can't wait for you to tune in next time. Until then, keep building a different practice.